He is everything major that is still wrong with New World. Now I do want to say I think the game is vastly better now than it was at launch, but I think it's fair to say that there are still some issues that need solving, and it's those we're going to talk about here. If you want to support me and help me grow the channel, then becoming a YouTube member is the best way. Now let's start off with some quick fire issues that most people agree are problems. The first one is gear management. At the minute, managing your gear is an absolute pain in the backside. Everybody sort of knows it, everybody sort of agrees. Now we are led to believe that some sort of like gear set system is on the way because they spoke about it in the dev update and it was data mined at one point. However, when asked about being able to manually rearrange stuff in your inventory, they were like, oh, we hadn't thought about that, we didn't know that was a good thing. Therefore, I'm not overly optimistic that we're going to be getting any kind of massive UI rework. I think we're just going to get evolution on what they currently have. I personally believe that we need to see a big UI change for this game to really flourish. Gear management will be a good thing, gear sets will be a good thing, but I think we're going to need to see more in the long run. Next one is relatively simple. I would like to see ranked PvP, and specifically there I'm talking about arena at least. Now I know we're getting leaderboards, but leaderboards are basically just going to be tracking your stats. It's not actually going to be like an ELO system. It's not going to be like putting you against the people of equal skill, and I think the PvP arena system is so set up for just having like a ranked system. I would love to see it. Let the sweat lords play with the sweat lords and let the plebs like myself play with other plebs. We'll have a great time. The next one is an obvious one as well, and that is we need to see a transmog system. Baffles my mind that we're this far into the game and we've not actually had one, especially considering that they have the skin system, but then again that sort of is self-explanatory. Why would they be so eager to give you a transmog system when they can charge you for skins and people will buy them even if they look a little bit funky? But yeah, having a paid system without having the transmog system to me feels awkward and bad. We know transmog is coming though. I would love to see it as quickly as possible. Or maybe not as quickly as possible, but quick anyway. Okay, let's move on to something a little bit more bigger and engaging. Let's talk about crafting. Now for me, the crafting is actually in two issues. One is a short-term issue and one is sort of more of a long-term issue. In the short term, crafting has been and sort of still is, but it's not as bad. It's still too random. Yes, we have the golden scouts, so now you can pick 2 perks, but you're only crafting a legendary 1 in 6 times, I think it is. It's all a little bit messy. It's too random. It's not enjoyable. I don't think most people like it. There are some of you mad people out there who do. Fair enough, respect to you guys, but I'm not in that camp and I think most people aren't. Now, I understand that the randomness is actually their way of balancing gear. If you made it all not random, you'd have people invest in slot stuff straight away and the whole sort of like gear chase would just dissipate into absolute nothingness. And that's sort of where I then go on to the second point in that, yes, you're right about that, and I think we need to see the way that gear is just handled be probably completely changed. Whether or not you're talking about the frequency that people get it, whether or not you're talking about the source that people get it, whether or not you're talking about the difficulty that way that people get it. I think the whole gear getting system needs to be changed. Now that's a big bold statement that I have no proof to like back up. That's just my feeling that I think they're going to have to do that for this game to be successful in the long run. You can disagree with me, that's fine. Maybe you enjoy that the way that it is now. I personally don't. I also think as part of that, they need to be looking at this perk system and how we actually determine quality of gear. We have basically like 3 main ways of determining gear and how strong it is. We have gear score, we have like rarity, as in like, you know, legendary, epic, etc. And then we have the actual perks themselves. Now out of all 3 of those, it's really the perks themselves that is probably the biggest factor. Yes, you're going to be at a massive disadvantage if you try and fight at 500 gear score versus somebody who's in 625 stuff, but really the perks are very, very important. And I think the way that the gear is so formulaic, the way that it just has like 1 or 2 stats, it then has a specific number of perks, and the perks are not really very like unique. I think that's going to cause problems. In specifically, I feel like you're always going to have the situation where a certain number of perks are just going to be the best perks. I would like gear to just feel a little bit more, almost a little bit more chaotic and a little bit more customized. I feel like they created a system where it was like very logical, but I also don't think it's very fun. But yeah, that's a whole different thing. They're going to have to change that like in the long term. You may or may not disagree with me. Maybe you like the way that it is now. Maybe you like the crafting. However, I think most people don't like the crafting, and to change the crafting, I think you then need to change everything else. Ultimately, yes, they're going to make it less random over time, and we've seen that, but yeah, that's what I truly believe. And the next thing for me is sort of similar, but it's regarding servers. And what I mean by that is I think we have a long-term problem but we have a short-term sort of possible fix. The short-term possible fix will be cross-realm, but the long-term problem is that the infrastructure of New World, or basically like its mechanics, lead itself to a situation where we have massive player number flux on specific servers, and these servers are capped at like 2,500. So effectively it either feels like a server is alive and well, or it feels like the numbers are slowly going away and the server's dead, and then people transfer off because the server's dead and you can't do the content. Then what happens? The servers get merged, and then we get new content, and then the servers get queues again, and people try and transfer off desperately, and then those servers die, and then people transfer back. It's just going to be like a rinse and repeat situation until the infrastructure or the way that the servers are dealt with in New World is changed. Now, I don't really want to see like one mega server. I like the idea of having a server that is unique and having a story, but it doesn't sort of feel like we're there either. So something's got to give at some point. What that is, I actually don't know. In the short term, we're going to get cross-realm. We know cross-realm is coming to Outpost Rush. That will make playing on a dead server much more viable. I'm saying dead, obviously it's not dead, but you get the gist. Because the problem with the dead server is that you can't do the content. If we had cross-realm Outpost Rush and cross-realm expeditions, then being on a quieter server is not that bad. You actually might be able to get into a war as a casual, and the only thing I can see you being excluded from is probably like chess runs, and they're not that amazing anyway for a lot of people. So cross-realm will definitely be a massive band-aid that servers need, but I think ultimately there needs to be some sort of more like sensible thought going into how they're going to manage servers. And the next one is simply we could do with another Outpost Rush map. Now I'm mentioning this one directly after servers because I think they might be waiting for cross-realm before we actually get this. And the idea being, if you had multiple Outpost Rush maps that you had to independently queue for, then those queues might never pop at the same rate of which one queue would pop. Thus you wouldn't be able to find games. However, once you have cross-realm, you have a bigger pool, and that might become less of an issue. Now I say an Outpost Rush map, I don't mind if it's the same game mode, but we're just looking at something that's like visually and physically different, or if we actually get different game modes, maybe like Capture the Flag or King of the Hill or something like that. Either way, we've been playing Outpost Rush now for over a year. It would be nice to see something else. And the next one is open world PvP. And again, here we know something is going to be changing. We know that the way that you push influence is going to change because we're going to have these sort of like small forts in every zone. That's going to spread out the small scale skirmishes. And we also know that you're not going to be able to just push a territory at all times of the day. They're going to be sort of like time specific, and that's going to create some kind of hotspot. However, that's really only for companies who are pushing wars and want to do that kind of thing. I would like to see some small scale open world PvP content that gives you a reason to go and fight in maybe like sizes of 1 to 5 rather than company versus company. I would like to see more content here. Now I'm trying to stick away from just saying like more content. Yes, an Outpost Rush map is more content, and yes, what I'm asking for here is more content, but I'm trying to specifically stay on systems. However, I think open world PvP has been so sort of neglected that I would desperately love to see something here. And the next one is going to be a few things combined. We're going to be talking about musket, light armor, medium armor and heavy armor, and mages. However, I'm not really going to talk about mages, I just want to talk about balance in general. So balance will always be in a state of flux. That's to be expected, that's the norm. And I think the mages at the minute, I seem to be seeing a lot of people saying that mages are weak, but then again some people think that the flamethrower in PvP arena is also super strong. So I mean, you know, perceptions here are obviously different person to person, and that's completely fine. But what I want to highlight with mages is I think the mage problem is actually more of a problem with just normal balance. I think they could tweak some stuff and you'd see more mages back on the field. And that kind of balance problem I don't necessarily think is a problem as long as they actually end up correcting it, right? However, the other two things that I mentioned, musket and the armor sets, I think that is a problem. So for the armor sets light, medium and heavy, apart from at launch where it seemed like heavy was just vastly better than everything else, for a long time now light armor has been stronger than pretty much everything else. Now they have done many different changes to actually try and address this balance, and things have got better. I think the last major thing that they did was make it so that a heavy user could basically try and stay on a light user to slow them down, and that has helped a little bit, but I think most people would say that light armor still probably the best overall. And for me, the main problem with light armor is relatively simple. You do the most amount of damage and you are the most survivable because you don't get hit because you're dodging around. As I said, they're fixing it a little bit, but I'm not personally sure that it's gone far enough. Now, I think they probably need to do a more universal approach to light, medium and heavy. I think they need to sort of change it mechanically and conceptually. Otherwise, I think we're always going to have this problem. And I think there's another problem along with that, which sort of goes into musket as well, and mages actually as well. And that is the idea of melee versus versus ranged. Because of the game is so heavily action combat, it's always going to be difficult to balance melee versus ranged. Melee feeling like that you can't attack anybody because they can just run off is a problem, and range feeling like that no matter what they do they're just going to get stunned by a melee person and die is also a problem. So this balance thing is going to be a complete problem for New World going forward. I think they really need to sit down for several months and maybe just think about the way that they can actually make it so that everybody feels happy. Now specifically with the musket, I think the musket needs a rework. It seems to me that you're always going to have this problem where the musket is either going to be super strong from long range and therefore annoying everybody, because yes, whilst you might be able to outplay somebody by dodging a little bit or moving a little bit, ultimately I think playing against a strong musket is just not very fun. Even if you argue that it is balanced, I think it's not a very fun experience for the other people. And then the counterpoint is you either then have it nerfed so much that nobody's actually picking musket, and I think that's a problem as well. For me, I think the musket needs a rework. I don't really think sniping is good for the game. I know several people disagree with me, one of the developers themselves disagrees with me, but I don't think sniping is all that good. Therefore, I would like to see the musket be changed into more sort of like a mid-range weapon, a little bit more like the bow. Yes, we joke about bow PR and stuff like that, but I felt like they could just tweak the bow so that everybody was happy. With the musket, it feels like if you tweak it, you're either going to make them completely not happy or everybody's going to be playing musket. So I think it needs a rework. That's the only weapon I think is actually problematic for the game, for now at least. So there's a couple of different things there, I'm sorry for rambling. You have the armor balance issue, you have range versus melee issue, you have the musket, which I think is an issue, and then you have mages, which I don't necessarily think is an issue. I think that's just sort of like short-term balance. And you might disagree with me, some elements might be in certain categories than others, but that's what I believe. I don't think balance is a major issue for New World, apart from those concepts that I outlined. Like, I think mages will be back at some point, even if they're broken, and there'll be many out of you though, like, I run the mage all the time, I'm completely decent with it. Fair enough. And then the next thing is something that I made a video about, I think just a couple of weeks ago now, and that is territory gold imbalance. Basically, I think that the amount of gold that people who own Windswood and Everfall get is still way too much. Yes, they have addressed it by making it so that the outer zones now get suitable and reasonable amounts of gold, and I think that that is a good change. It's a good change, but without having it at the same time as which the defenders have to defend with 35 people in the company, meant that we still have shell companies, so it's not really all that useful right now. However, I still think ultimately that it's way too much gold, and I don't think it's the right reward structure for owning territories. Yes, people who own territories should be rewarded, and I'm going to say that all the time, but I don't think it should be gold. I've come more and more to the conclusion that I think it should just be directly gear, and the reason for that is relatively simple. Gold affects everybody who plays the game, basically. It's a player-driven economy, therefore giving gold to a certain small number of people and not others changes the way that the economy functions. If I never participate in a war, I'm still weirdly affected by it because it puts gold in the hands of a certain amount of people, which is generally a small number of people, and then when I want to buy something that's, you know, maybe useful for PvP and PvE, I'm now competing with them as well. Now, yes, I could go and try and compete in the wars, but maybe I'm not interested in that. Whereas if you just gave them good gear and maybe less gold, surely the PvPers are getting what they want, because ultimately they're doing it for power and status and that kind of thing, and it gives everybody else what they want. So I think it should just be rewarding them gear at this point, and I think it would then make the economy feel more like a level playing field. Now, I know that there's this theory that the gold trickles down. Ultimately, bots are probably farming the materials, the people in these companies are buying the materials from the bots, and then the gold which the bots get probably go back in the hands of the most dedicated players. No specific accusations there, but probably happens, right? So for me, I think the whole territory control system probably needs to be reworked. Ultimately, I think you could actually combine that with the way that the servers are reworked, because I think maybe if you change one you might want to change the other just to get that sort of like issue done and dealt with. But yeah, for me, those are the big issues that the game currently has. Some of them are being like addressed here and there, some of them not so much. If you want to support me and help me grow the channel, becoming a YouTube member is really the best way. As always, I do still truly like the game, I just think it has a couple of problems. If you think there's a problem that I missed, then put it in the comments and let me know. Have a most beautiful day, like and subscribe. Goodbye.